All right, welcome back to the Week 7 Forum, or welcome to the Week 7 Forum. This week, again, we are looking at the question of what constitutes data. And of course, as we're finding, as we look over the course of the material that we've covered to this point, we realize uh, that when you're looking at things from a behavioral perspective or when you're looking at them from an interpretive perspective, the kinds of data that you're going to think are important are going to, and the conceptual precision that you need are going to be, increasingly important. As a political theorist, I believe that thinking clearly and clearly articulating what you mean is very important. When we talk about conceptualizing, concepts like terrorism or power, these are very slippery terms that are very hard to define clearly. They're very hard to operationalize. Is an individual assassination where one low-level figure, one level, political figure or a military officer is assassinated. How does that count in the broader, scope of things that constitute terrorism compared, for example, again, to 9/11? Likewise, when you look at the idea of qualitative data, what are the advantages of quantitative versus qualitative data? Obviously, with quantitative data, again, you can get much more precise measurements, and with precision, you can basically see regularities a little bit more clearly. Uh, the underside of that, of course, is that you oftentimes have the problem of not always getting a clear understanding of the context surrounding a concept and what are the factors that might be intervening to affect the way that variable is behaving. So how do we go about as political scientists measuring difficult to define concepts in politics and political, international relations? When you look at this idea of essentially contested concepts, like terrorism, the whole phrase, that one man's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter, suggests something important, and it means that people from different ideological perspectives are going to define terrorism in different ways. People who are on the conservative end of the spectrum are going to be more inclined to identify a definition of terrorism that focuses on dissident terrorism or on state sponsorship of terrorism. People more on the left end of the spectrum are going to focus more on the terrorism that is perpetrated by the state. And that's going to create real problems in terms of understanding terrorism in a way that is, interreliable, among scholars. Um, I like that idea of coder reliability. How do you know? And that's one thing that we find when we look at terrorist data sets is that, are terrorist events coded, adequately to be able to understand the phenomenon of terrorism as a quantitative phenomenon. I think the idea of levels of measurement are very important, that because different measures are more meaningful and give us more interpretive ability. For example, when you're looking at the idea of of the interest that you might have in what's going on in politics, where you're able to say, none at all to very much. It gives you, it gives you a continuum, and when you have a continuum, you're oftentimes in a better position to interpret data and to get an idea of intensity of people's responses, which can oftentimes be very important and very valid, or add validity to the things that you're trying to do. I think, again, as a political theorist, as someone that's more on the qualitative side of things, I'm a little bit more comfortable talking about things like how do you go about conducting interviews? How do you avoid, grouping questions or framing questions in leading ways that can get, can cause people who are being interviewed to give you inaccurate data. Again, as with all this material, there's a lot to unpack. Let me know again if you're struggling with anything. I'll try to help you with it. Let me know what you think is most important. Let's try and apply this stuff to current events. I'm sure there's a lot going on that that we could find that that applies in the world as we know it. You know, when you look at what's going on with trying to identify the science behind coronavirus and the politics around it, you know, because of course recently, for example, the Biden administration said 8 months after your second shot, if you've gotten the Moderna or Pfizer shot, you should get a booster. Well, now the FDA is saying, no, we don't need that. That's probably not likely to be, you know, that important. It's more important for us to get people vaccinated. It's more important for us to get young people vaccinated at this point. That's the better path towards achieving herd immunity. You know, what are the politics that kind of creates that kind of problem, and how do we go about, again, you know, identifying you know, the science that helps us to understand how people are reacting to this sort of thing. So anyway, a lot of stuff to talk about. Let's have a good time this week. Of course, I'll be out, but I should be internet available. I think I'll be in Madison, Wisconsin this week until Tuesday. So I will be trying to pitch in and check in with you guys and get grading done and all that stuff, as always. So let's have a great week.